This is the lecture recording that goes with the Human Population Dynamics PowerPoint. So for the first recording, I will be going over the science of demographics. And then the second recording will be world population through time and the human population and the environment. So here are your learning objectives for this first section that refers to demography. So you need to be able to define the terms population, total fertility rate, and carrying capacity. You will need to be able to describe the three factors that contribute to population growth. And then for your final learning objective, if I give you a hypothetical situation or a group of people, you have to tell me whether that increases or decreases the birth rate. So on this first slide, I am describing what the field of demographics is. So basically, it is the study of human population growth. Now, on my slide here, it says structures, and that just means like how many males, how many females are in a community or a population, how many are young, middle-aged, and old. So these are all population structures that people in demographics look at. Now, the study of demographics actually crosses many different disciplines. You have like geography, genetics, sociology, things like that, that help to study how human populations grow. Now, in your learning objective, I stated that you have to know the definition for a population. Well, this is not just for humans, but for all organisms. A population is a group of organisms of the same species in a given area. So for instance, if I'm looking at the Sonoran Desert by Tucson, I could look at a population of coyotes, right? They're all the same species and they're in a given area. So let's look at how human population grows. So what you're looking at here is called an exponential curve or a J-shaped curve. So what is this showing you here is that as human population grows, it just keeps getting bigger, 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 and there's nothing that is really controlling the growth of the population. So when I say controlling the growth, I mean things like predators, lack of habitat, disease. All of those things control almost every other population of organisms, right? They'll grow and then the population size will level out because of those pressures on the population, like predation. So think about it this way. There was a study done in a place called the Kaibab Plateau. And there were a bunch of deer there, still are. And so these deer kept, the population increased, right? Until it went way over what the environment could support. There were too many deer, not enough food. So the population went up, but then it came down until it reached a level at which there was enough food. Okay, so normally populations of organisms will go up and then they'll level out, but not the human population. Now, some would argue, okay, there's disease, there's famine, things like that, but it is not to such an extent that it is controlling the size of our population. Now, on here, I put define the term carrying capacity. So I'm going to write this down for you. The carrying capacity is what I was talking about with the leveling off of the size of a population. So carrying capacity, the maximum number of individuals in a population, so they're the same species, the maximum number of individuals in a population that the environment, oh my gosh, I cannot type, can support. So the maximum number of individuals in a population that the environment can support. So with the deer, it was like grazing area, right? Food for grazing. So at the Kaibab Plateau, the carrying capacity was 10,000 individual deer. So when the population spiked to like 30,000, a bunch of them starved until the population reached 10,000 again. So that is carrying capacity. That's what causes populations to level off. But humans do not have that with regards to our population size. Now, different types of scientists have been trying to calculate the carrying capacity of the Earth for humans, and that is highly debated. Is there a carrying capacity? How many humans can be supported? So we're at about 7 billion in the human population, and there are different projections as to when we'll level out. Some people think it's about 9.5 billion. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so one of your learning objectives was to describe the 3 factors that can affect population growth rate. Okay, now remember, growth rate is different than population size. Population growth rate is how fast is the population growing year to year. Now, there are 3 factors that can affect population growth: births or fertility, death rate or mortality, and migration, which includes immigration or people coming into the country, and emigration, people leaving an area. So birth rate, death rate, migration. And on the slide, I called it fertility, mortality, and migration. Those are the 3 factors that affect population growth. So I'm going to write down the equation for you. So population growth rate equals, we're going to say births plus immigration, people coming into the area, minus deaths plus emigration. So all that is saying is that when you are looking at population growth, you need to take all of the organisms born plus those moving into the area and subtract all the organisms that died and moved out of the area. And that will give you the population size. And then you can get growth rate. Okay. So now let's break this down. I have to take Okay, let's break these 3 factors down a little bit. So one of your learning objectives, like I stated, you had to define population, carrying capacity, but also total fertility rate. So total fertility rate, you look at it like a country or a given area, is the average number of children born per woman in a given society during her childbearing years or throughout her childbearing years. So basically, what that means is you take a country and you look at the average number of children that women are having, and that is your total fertility rate. Now, if you look at the graph here, so let's see, the orange line is developed countries like the US. The blackish line is the entire world, whoops. And the like greenish line is developing countries. So what I want you to see here is that the total fertility rate is decreasing worldwide. And that's a good thing. It does bring along some issues, but for the most part, that's a good thing. So there are populations, though, within different countries where the fertility rate is not, well, it's dropping, but it's higher than, say, other groups. So let me state that again. There are groups in a given society, like a country, that have a higher fertility rate than other groups. So the trend, and I'm not saying whether this is good or bad, this is just what the data shows. So racial and ethnic minorities tend to have higher fertility rates. Low-income families or families with a lower level of education tend to have higher fertility rates. And then finally, women who stay at home instead of being out in the workforce also tend to have more children. So your final learning objective for this section was, if I give you a hypothetical description of a group of people, will it increase or decrease the birth rate and death rate? So if I were to describe, say, I don't know, if I were to give you a scenario with a low income family and a high income family, you would need to tell me like which one would have a higher fertility rate. Okay, so it's just taking examples and applying it to the groups that I've given you on this slide. Okay, so remember the first factor affecting population growth rate is birth rate or fertility. The second factor is death rate or mortality. Now on here, I gave you a graph for life expectancy. So that's the average number of years a person will live in a given society. Now, what I want you to notice here, actually, let me write that definition down for you. So life expectancy okay, the average number of years a person can expect to live in a given region or country. Now, what I want you to notice here is that life expectancy, whoops, PowerPoint went away, there we go. Life expectancy is increasing all over the world, right? People are living longer. Now, there's still a huge gap between life expectancy in developed countries like the US and many countries in Europe than there is in developing countries like India or Mexico. So if you see here, the orange line being developed countries, our life expectancy is much higher. We're into the 80s, whereas developing countries are in maybe the mid 70s. So it is getting better for everyone though. Now, there are two things a government can do to increase the life expectancy of their citizens. So the first one would be meeting basic human needs. And then I put through environmental investment. So for instance, everyone needs clean drinking water. So environmental investment would be building an infrastructure to deliver clean water to everyone. And surprisingly, clean access to clean water is something many millions of people around the world do not have. And I was just watching a news story. Apparently, in the US, we have not updated our infrastructure for clean water since early 19th century. So there are many areas in the US where people have to boil their water. They cannot use water out of their faucets. In some areas, they on the news story I watched, the water even comes out blue. So meeting basic human needs is something that will increase life expectancy, like sanitation or sewage systems. Also creating a public health infrastructure so that people can get vaccinated, they can get treated for diseases. So these are so important to raising life expectancy. I keep looking to the side because I have a monitor over there. Okay, so the, oh, I missed a slide. There we go. The third factor affecting population growth is migration. Now, remember I told you that was immigration, people coming into an area, and emigration, people leaving an area. Now, migration doesn't add people to the global human population, but it does change how many people are in certain areas. And in recent years, this has caused considerable environmental damage as people overwhelm the services of a country. Let's say if you have a mass migration into another country, maybe they don't have housing or sanitation or those things to deal with the influx of people. And that can cause environmental damage. Now, one thing I wrote here is that migration has increased considerably because of war and environmental degradation. People have moved because they can no longer grow crops in an area because they grew crops for so long that the soil is depleted and you can't grow on it anymore. So migration occurs for both of those reasons. Now, if we look at this, I guess, chart that I put down here, you can see, so the darker blue is 2019, the lighter blue is 2005. So you can see that all across the world, migration is increasing, especially in Asia and parts of Europe. So that is going to change human populations throughout the globe. And along with that come different environmental challenges. Okay, so let's review the learning objectives. So you had to be able to define population, total fertility rate, carrying capacity, and then I also gave you life expectancy. So let me bring up this box here. So remember that population is a group of organisms of the same species in a given area. Okay, a group of organisms of the same species in a given area. Total fertility rate is the average number of children a woman can be expected to have in a specific society. That's not the definition I gave you on the other slide, but it means the same thing. Oh, and I forgot here, the average number of children a woman can be expected to have in a specific society throughout her childbearing years. And then finally, we have carrying capacity, the maximum number of individuals in a population that can be supported by the environment. Again, not the exact same definition I gave you before, but it means the same thing. So think about the Kaibab Plateau. It supports 10,000 deer, but food was a limiting factor. So when they got to 30,000 deer, a bunch of them starved until it came back down to 10,000. So humans do not have a carrying capacity as of yet. So describe the 3 factors that affect human population growth. We have birth rate, death rate, migration. And you can go back to the recording where I wrote down the exact equation. And then demonstrate an understanding of population dynamics So basically, if I give you a group of people, you need to tell me, will the death and birth rates be higher than a different group of people? So just get to know the slide where I told you, okay, fertility rate tends to be higher in these groups. Okay, so that is the end of this lecture recording. So I will be doing another recording on the other two parts of this PowerPoint.